Trump is also running into headwinds on the war in Iran, with some in his own party criticizing his actions in the Middle East. Despite the pushback, Trump is making it clear that the war is his top priority. Not the economy, not your gas prices, and certainly not some of the things that are critically important to millions of you at home. This week, in a now deleted video from the White House YouTube page, Trump had this to say on childcare costs, Medicare and Medicaid.
I said to Russell, don't send any money for daycare because the United States can't take care of daycare. That has to be up to a state. We're fighting wars. We can't take care of daycare, Medicaid, Medicare, all these individual things. They can do it on a state basis. You can't do it on a federal. We have to take care of one thing, military protection.
Joining us now, Maria Teresa Kumar, MS Now contributor and president and CEO of Voto Latino, and Eddie Glaude, MS Now political analyst and professor at Princeton University. Maria Teresa, I want to start with you because for my entire life, maybe your entire life, Donald Trump has been...
I like the way you added...
Yeah, I'm like, you're awesome.
We talk later.
He's been building kind of like this alternate reality, tailored to his own preferences, tailored to his biases, tailored to how he wants the world to be. And in business, that's kind of fine, right? Like you can do that because you're running your own business. He's now running this country and therefore at the top of the heap of running the free world. But he's imposing that reality, a false reality, something that's not real, on everybody else. And that is the through line between Iran, the DOJ, and who's going to be next. It won't matter because he will still try to impose that same reality.
Well, I think, first of all, one of the things that what struck me is that on April Fool's, he takes to the podium to say that we're winning the war. We're like, really? And he speaks to that two realities. But, what he also did, this is duality, and he does this every single time. He speaks to one audience, and for those who are watching it live saying, wait a second, he contradicted himself.
Right.
But what we have to understand is that he's speaking to the other audience that's going to be cut up and spliced on Fox News. And so we have to recognize that he's always speaking on two sides of his mouth because it's for the base that is very much in this completely different echo chamber. And when we recognize that, then we can actually say, no, he's not living in an alternate reality. He recognizes that he's on really soft footing. And wait a second, they might find out that not only is the war in Iran bad, but that their gas prices are up. And guess what? They are.
Right.
And that is why he's now firing Pat Bondi. That is why he's looking to fire the Secretary of Labor. That is why all of a sudden he's trying to clean house because he's trying to, once again, deflect, saying, this is not my fault. It's all theirs. But I do think that this softening actually allows for the American people to kind of like break out of the fever of, yes, he is always the king. It's allowing the American people, whether you are an independent, a Democrat, even a Republican, saying, wait a second, saying, I know that my costs are too high, and I also know that the war is bad. One of the things out of this war that people keep talking about, rising, skyrocketing gas prices, that is, yes, the pump, but you know what? Your retail is also going to be impacted because there's so many products that depend on petroleum, whether you're talking about medicine, whether you're talking about cosmetics, whether you're talking about retail. And so I do think that he is weakened. And what concerns me is that even Susan Wiles is saying, wait a second, you guys have to start telling him the truth.
Right.
But they're so afraid to tell him the truth that he actually is living within this alternative reality.
And so then, Eddie, to Maria Teresa's point about this possibly allowing people to break out of the fever, I mean, do you agree with that? Is this possibly a turning point moment?
It could be. I think Maria Teresa just made an extraordinarily important point, but I think we also have to understand the nature of that 10, 20% that supports Donald Trump. I think also we have to interrogate the nature of the softening. I mean, I think on the one hand, Donald Trump's coalition has always consisted of this odd combination of the populist wing of the Republican Party, libertarians and corporate Republicans. And you saw it in the early days in the debate or the dispute or arguments between Stephen Bannon and Elon Musk. Now, that populist base has certain kinds of expectations, no more forever wars, a kind of general conspiracy, a general distrust of government and the like, and trying to, in some ways, get policies to address their conditions. But that populist wing also trades in a kind of, how can I put this, Jonathan, a kind of money-making conspiracy position. They stand on the outside, always kind of calling attention to big government's effort to undo, big money's effort to fleece you. And so it seems to me that that element of that populist wing, the Tucker Carlsons and the like, are also trying to figure out how they're going to continue to make money in relation to their grievance and their conspiracy theories.
Yeah, Eddie, actually, I want to stay on this, some of the reporting around the deterioration of support in the populist wing that you're talking about. Isaac Arnsdorf, Washington Post, reported this week that, in case you missed it, with all of the other mayhem going on, that Trump has also backed off his campaign promise to protect Medicare and help with child care. Important campaign promises. These divisions matter because in this era, CPAC is supposed to be the tip of the spear, Arnsdorf wrote, of the MAGA faithful. If some of Trump's most fervent supporters are already incensed, then that could be a harbinger of Trump shedding more of his base in the coming weeks. I mean, do you think... What do you think will actually break through when it comes to this MAGA faithful that Arnsdorf is writing about? I mean, is childcare, is Social Security, are these going to be the things that ultimately put the nail in the coffin for Trump? Because we haven't really seen a lot of these other issues, at least with, again, this group, the base, actually penetrate.
Right. I think there's a moment when the base can't feed on the red meat of the culture wars any longer. When it comes to keeping a roof over their head, taking care of their parents, making sure they can go to work and their children are taken care of, the gas pump, food prices, buying clothes come when the next school term begins. All of these things will happen because the supply chain isn't going to be fixed tomorrow, even if the war stops. So I think once that base begins to see that their grievance is finally coming home to roost, that they can't live off of hate, that it's impacting in so many ways their bottom line, then they're going to cry out like they're beginning to cry out now. But I also want to just say this. What did you make of that moment when government can't pay for daycare? I kept asking myself, Jackie, what is the social contract in this country anymore?
That's right.
What is the basis of our social obligation, our fundamental obligation to each other? I don't know what the idea of the public good is anymore. Is it just simply to propose a $1.5 trillion defense budget? What happened to the general welfare? And it seems to me there has to, beyond Trump's base, we have to begin to interrogate what is the basis of our living together in these times, because they seem to be dismantling every single aspect of this country and our democracy.
And Maria Teresa, I just heard you say that's right in response to Eddie.
Well, this is the thing, is that this idea that all of a sudden the states are going to be in charge of child care and Medicare possibly is obscene, because he's saying we are going to basically transfer all your tax dollars to go pay for a war that nobody wants. Because that has become our priority. And it's become a priority because whoever figures out how to extract the oil from Iran is going to be extraordinarily wealthy. So it goes back to this grifting that the American people are starting to catch on. But something that Eddie said that really struck with me as well is that for the very first time, all the polling that we've done in Voto Latino, the three top issues have been now consecutively: politics keep me up at night, affordability is a problem, and they specifically say Donald Trump is a problem. We have never in our 20 years history ever had any public survey that includes Latinos, independent white voters, name a president by name as what's keeping you up at night. And it does speak to this idea that not only is the social contract broken, but he is creating real anxiety where people feel like they can't come back. And if you're like saying, what is our red alert? And I'm glad you're having Stacey Abrams on later on. Our red alert is that he knows he's losing. And so he's going to try to do every single thing to cheat at the ballot box, whether we're talking about the SAVE Act, whether we're talking about deploying ICE at polling booths, or what happens if we get a scenario that we saw in Arizona with Grijalva, who was not seated for a long time. So we actually have to start thinking about, even if we win en masse, we have to start preparing the American public that we want to understand how are we going to seat the people that we have won.